Welcome to Talking About It. I'm John Griffith.
I'm Cara. Happy New Year.
Yeah, it's first show of the year.
I know.
New week, new times, and all that good stuff.
All kinds of new stuff.
How have you been? How were your holidays?
My holidays were good. I was sick like everyone else. I was so sick that my mother let me sleep in and I didn't go to church.
Oh, wow.
Like, my mother is very Catholic, and, you know, it's like you go to church, and we were supposed to go to midnight mass. We didn't go, and then I was like, well, what time's the next mass? And she's like, 8. And I was like, fine, just let me sleep this off. We'll go to church in the morning. Okay. She comes in my room. It's like 9 o'clock. I'm like, Mom. She's dressed, and she's like, well, I just figured it'd be best for you to just sleep.
Oh,
I was
wow.
like, wow, you really believe I am sick? And I am. So, yeah, but that was great. But, hey, you know what I did over the holidays? No, you don't, so I'm going to tell you. I did a little holiday short horror film with with Astrid Ovias and her wife, and it was so much fun because we were talking about it, you know, and I kept saying, I was like, yeah, you know, let me, you know, just make I know I'm gonna die, so make my death memorable. And she's like, no, you're not gonna die. Your part is instrumental. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was so much fun. Shot it in 4 days. Okay. And you can find it on YouTube for free. It's called Silent Night Vow. And it's a lesbian Christmas horror movie. Because Astrid got pissed off, and Sarah too, about all the rom-coms. So they were like, screw this, let's make a horror movie. So it was a lot of fun. That's
cool. I have to check it out.
Yeah, it's like 20 minutes long.
Okay, I wish you told me about it beforehand. Otherwise, I would have been stalking you on it.
No, and Astrid's particularly good at prosthetic makeup and stuff. Oh, she made her wife look horrible. Like, wow. And guys, if you weren't here, she was our guest in November. So I want to plug her movie again, Road of Bygones. You can find that on Vimeo. You can find Silent Night Vow and all her other stuff on her YouTube channels. And it's YouTube, / Recluse, Astrid Ovias. And you should find everything there.
Just use the Google.
Yeah, use the Google. It was so much fun, though.
That's cool.
How are your holidays? What did you
do? Actually, we hosted Christmas and Thanksgiving, and it was really good. Success. Everybody was well fed. I did my usual baking extravaganza. So it's like I miss all my New York peeps because I still bake enough for all my friends up here. So I'm still getting rid of holiday cookies down there.
I just finished the last of mine. Like, my mother was like, take some of these cookies with you. I'm like, yeah, you don't have to twist my arm, all right.
So, and then, so in a little bit of a lull, and we're just cruising around online. Cruising.
Dirty whore.
That's not what I meant. I was accidentally punny. Stumbled across a cruise deal, so on Monday I'm heading off for 4 days.
You and the cruises.
$109 for a 4-day cruise. You can't turn that. You can't turn that down. Had to shift a doctor's appointment, but I'm heading to Key West and Cozumel.
God bless you. Just do it.
Exactly, and that's really what's going on with me. Yeah. You don't want to hear about all my doctors and dental appointments. I'm not going to go into that with the...
Oh, what are you talking? My sciatica's acting up.
Oy, my neuropathy.
Oh, my God. Face. I can't.
But there's a whole lot going on in the world, but I'd rather talk about some other stuff that we have going on.
I would rather talk to our guests.
Exactly. That's what I'm beating around the bush about.
We'll dive in. Go ahead.
Okay, well...
What do we have?
I'll leave that to you.
John is such a punk. He always makes me introduce the guests. Okay. Tonight we have two very special guests. We have, I don't want to mess up your last name, Ellen Metzer. Ellen Metzer and Valerie Hughes. They wrote, together they wrote this book, Nurses on the Inside.
A phenomenal book.
Stories of the HIV/AIDS epidemic in New York City. And thank you for coming here and being with us tonight.
Thank you for writing the book, first and foremost. God. Because it's an insight to a lost generation, and you were on the front lines of what was at the time a very new battle, and I'm floored by the challenges you faced and the people whose lives that you helped make a little bit better at the end of theirs and sharing the stories with us. I'm tongue-tied at the moment, but it was such a powerful read for me, just because of the insight that you provided as to everything that I kind of peripherally knew about, but never really knew about. You think you know, but you don't know.
Oh, no, absolutely. Like I said before we started the show, I'm a little bit younger than John, but reading this brought up all the memories of when they called it GRID, and it was, the gay cancer or whatever. And I remember when it was first being, I was a kid watching the news, and then Ryan White happened, but I mean, you were there before, like when weird cases started to come in. I mean, you guys were. It's for me, it's amazing to read that.
Yeah.
The compassion that you have and the willingness to help these patients. I mean, I don't know how you did that day in and day out. Like,
that's the job, though.
I know, but you guys are like badasses. You're warriors. I mean, I told you that a couple of minutes ago, but I'm also tongue-tied because this is really it's powerful.
Well, let's kind of start at the beginning. And when did you realize that something was going on?
Probably 1978 into 79. 79 was when Valerie and I met.
Okay.
And probably a few months after that, we started to see a kind of cluster of odd things in the critical care unit. We were both ICU nurses. And I think probably one or two cases may have gone by and not really bringing our attention or raising our antenna, so to speak. And then there was this one case that we did write about in the book. It was a 62-year-old physician, actually. And they actually did a biopsy on his lung and found pneumocystis pneumonia.
That was the French doctor.
Yes.
Right.
And so we all talked about it, doctors, nurses, and we thought, oh, well, we're just seeing an aberrant case of something, and we probably won't see it again. And that's really what we thought. And I remember a group of us nurses presented this as grand rounds to other nurses in the hospital. And I believe it ended something like, this is rather unusual. We don't imagine we'll see this anymore. And there was something particular with this patient, and that was the end of it. And then the onslaught started coming in, only we still didn't know what we were dealing with. So we're talking very late 70s, for us anyway. Then we started to see more and more, again, young men. We didn't know they were gay at that point, just men, and coming in with the same symptoms. A cold that didn't go away, fevers, night sweats, went to their doctors. They said, oh, you're healthy, here's, go home, chicken soup, rest, fluids, the usual. Then maybe they didn't get better, put them on an antibiotic, go home, rest, fluids, Tylenol, chicken soup. Only that wasn't the answer.
I think that a lot of times the onset of PCP was so subtle, because PCP is the pneumonia that they always talk about, pneumocystis carinii pneumonia. It was subtle because people didn't really feel horribly sick at first. They just were a little short of breath, and they sort of noticed that they couldn't really carry stuff up the stairs, and then they really weren't able to go up the stairs even if they weren't carrying anything. So those are subtle things that happen over the course of several weeks.
Like with that patient, Gary, the hairdresser.
Yeah. And so that it was just, it's subtle, and so people thought it was nothing because they were young and healthy. So
Yeah, that's got to
it
be
was very confounding.
And reading that, like seeing that it was these young men in their 20s. I was 25 years old when I moved to New York. I can't even. I mean, they were like kids, practically.
Kids, they were kids.
They were kids. We were kids. It was hard to see people our age be so sick because most of the people that you see in an ICU are not kids.
Yeah. Oh God, I didn't even think about that. Like you guys were the same age as all those
That's
guys
right.
coming in. Oh Jesus.
Yeah, that's got to be. It's a dark reflection, really, and just through the evolution, I mean, when they were kind of discovering which community it was hitting, which was the gay community predominantly, a lot of these people were ostracized once it hit, and that's got to be incredibly difficult on them, which goes without saying. But just to be able to be the person that's there on your end, you know, to give them some kind of comfort and to give them something to hold on to is a blessing for them, but it had to be difficult for you.
I think it was very hard to see so many people die. I mean,
Yes.
we're used to death. I had seen many, many people die before the epidemic, but somehow seeing all these extremely young and nominally healthy people die was difficult. But what you were referring to before, the stigma attached to homosexuality, was so difficult because a lot of times people who are disenfranchised, and gay people are often disenfranchised, do not seek out health care for that very reason. They're disenfranchised. They know that they're going to get some sort of crap for their lifestyle, and so they don't engage. And I get that. I totally get that. So that's why people often present it in such bad shape, because they didn't go in the earlier times when they weren't feeling quite so horrible.
Right.
But it wouldn't have made any difference, I'm afraid.
I mean, there was no HIV testing. Now you see signs, and it's all over social media. Get tested, know your status.
Yeah, but in 1979 there was nothing.
There was nothing.
There was no test until 1985. So
That's
God.
no test, and no medicine until 1988.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
it is. I mean, in retrospect, and then just going through it, and just I'm sure, just, you know, in coordination with the other medical professionals, just trying to throw anything that you can possibly think of at it, just to see what works, and just watching it not it is difficult. I mean, you go into some of the stories of the people who passed through your lives in the book, and you know, say what are these men for the most part going through? What's the mindset that you're seeing? I mean, is there early on, is there any particular story that you can share and just kind of describe what was going on for them?
I think that the early story that I wrote about was probably 1979, 1980. I remember we had started to isolate patients just a few months in, since we didn't know what we were dealing with. And I walked into the room to find a patient, Robert, and his partner on the bed with him. And that was my first experience seeing a gay couple, because other than that, I'd never thought about it. And so I was a little surprised. And it never occurred to me that what I saw then was going to become a trend, or was already a trend. So there was a great deal of fear in that room. It was palpable, because Robert couldn't breathe. He could not breathe. Even though we had him on as close to 100% oxygen as we could. And his boyfriend was trying to joke a little, and but I could tell that they were both so frightened. And it was only probably hours when Robert could really no longer sustain his own breathing and needed to be placed on a ventilator. And so there was his boyfriend David, who just had no words. What is happening? What's going on? I don't understand. Nobody understood.
I mean, even we were kind of shocked by how quickly people crashed and burned.
That
It
was the
shocking.
thing that struck me
Yeah.
while reading, was that you would get this patient in and you would try to stabilize them somehow, and then boom, like.
Things went bad very, very quickly, and it was surprising to us as well.
Did that make you guys, I mean, as medical professionals, did that make you had to have felt helpless?
Totally helpless, yeah.
Yes.
Like all your training, and I imagine.
Usually the stuff we did was pretty successful at sustaining life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in this case, not. I mean, I could think of maybe 4 cases other than the HIV epidemic where I felt so totally at a loss. But other than that, for the most part, we had it taped. We knew, you use 100% oxygen. If that doesn't work, you move on to intubation, then you move on to weaning, you get some antibiotics, some steroids on board, and boom, they get better. But that wasn't happening.
Right.
So no matter what we were throwing at them, they were not getting better. And there they were, like babies in the bed, not getting better. It was horrible.
That was another thing that struck me too, was how you guys had to improvise with the guy who had the thrush in his mouth, and you coated the inside of his mouth with Vaseline to clean the blood out.
Well, that was, that he actually had dried blood on his mouth,
Yeah.
and that's how you get dried blood out.
But I mean, the improvisation with the catheter for
As a rectal tube,
for-
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that was
That's a very
later.
nursey thing.
Yeah.
Nurses do that all the
Yeah, we do nursey things. We're like MacGyvers. We're like MacGyvers and Scrubs. Just give us a tube and a stick of gum, and we can do something with it.
Do something nursey.
Yeah.
I love that though. Like,
Yes.
you guys are so impressive. And like, I'm reading this, and the description of you, Valerie, like, I just imagine this really tall, kind of scary, beautiful woman, and then like I walk in today, and you have this nice smile. You're like, hi, and the story of how you two met and became friends, and. I had this mental picture, like, wow, I wouldn't want to cross that lady on a bad day. People didn't.
Well, we did. Oh yeah. That's right.
But I mean, I'm appreciative of those personality traits now. Like as I was reading, like you guys were like tenacious pit bulls.
Yeah, and we were at the top of our game. We could really
Yes,
get
you
stuff
were.
done,
Yeah.
but it didn't help.
And that's another thing that was I got angry reading was when you had some of the prisoners from Ossining come, and the corrections people were being such dicks. Like you guys are so used to I need this now, and they're like, well, oh man.
Yeah, that was a particularly challenging time with the opening of the inmate unit there, of which I was the director by then. But yeah, we had to realize that we were a facility and a hospital. We were a prison and a hospital. So we had to abide by the rules of the prison, which, I won't forget this, everything had to be locked. There couldn't be anything in the hallway, and one of the female security guards, a very large woman, when I had the linen cart in the hallway, she says, I got a gun, what do you got? And like, because the linen cart could be used as a weapon. And I'll never forget that line. But the other issue was that if we needed to take a patient off the unit for a test, an x-ray, because back then they didn't have portable x-rays, the patients had to go downstairs. The nurse had to go, but you had to have an armed corrections officer and an unarmed corrections officer. Now, I don't recall the reason for having two, but these patients were so weak in the bed, they weren't going to move
Right.
anyway.
I can, having done security work
So-
years and years ago, I can, the unarmed, just in case they, the mentality is that the person is secretly strong. But
Okay.
the unarmed person close
Okay.
by in case
I
they
get
try
it.
to grab at them, and the armed person just in case they do grab them.
Right. So that was the reason. But often there wasn't one or the other. The armed person or the unarmed person was unavailable. So there was no x-ray. That was it. Sorry, can't do it now. So we have the one side of healthcare where the doctor's saying, we need the x-ray. And then you have the security saying, sorry, can't do it. Do it later.
You made that point though in the book that like, where are they going to go? What are they
Yeah.
going to do?
But being, having this illness and being a prisoner, it's a double whammy on their part,
Yes.
because that's two mental strikes and two legal well, not two legal strikes, but you know what I'm saying. It's two strikes that helping to keep them down, and there wasn't much treatment at the time, but it's a blockage. It's blocking their treatment and blocking.
I believe that still happens today.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is a whole other show in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
yes. And I remember when we did have HIV testing, when we opened the testing clinic, we used to take turns doing the HIV counseling and testing, and they brought the inmates in on a certain day. And the inmates were not afforded the privacy. I insisted on it. See, the inmates were brought in handcuffed and shackled, and they would not uncuff them if I closed the door. Then they would have to uncuff them and open the door so I could draw blood. But many of the corrections officers wanted to know they were being tested. They wanted them tested, but it was up to the patient. And many of them chose not to be tested at the time because there was nothing to do if they turned positive. But the dichotomy
except for
of
stigma and
yes,
Right.
except for stigma. so they were stigmatized for even showing up at the hospital to be tested. So that was just another kind of chapter in that is not in the book, but I do recall that how difficult that was.
And just because in the early days it was such an unknown, what were the obstacles even within the medical community? Because you don't know, doctors and nurses don't know exactly what this is, how is it passed, and and what's going on. Did you come across people who just didn't want to touch anybody?
Oh, absolutely. So people couldn't get procedures done. I had a patient who had broken his hip as a child and had not healed well, and so he really needed his hip replaced. And this was in the days before we had effective antiretroviral therapy, so before we even had viral loads. So we knew that he was potentially infectious, but we didn't know how bad, and it probably was pretty bad. But he needed that hip because he couldn't walk, and he was 30 years old. And everybody said, no, he's not going to live long enough to be able to use this hip. And I said, how can you predict that? Plus, why should he be miserable for the whatever short time he has left? But there was one physician who agreed to do it, and later on, I had both my knees replaced by that very same surgeon.
Well, the same thing was true with dental care. I mean, nobody could get dental care because dentists were afraid of getting stuck with tiny little needles. So at St. Clair's, we hired a dentist.
And they developed universal precautions.
Right.
And,
Right, which is
and
Exactly.
that's how they
So-
learned. And now all dentists use that. So, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember as a child having my dentist's bare hand in my mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now, doctor, dentist, whatever, nobody comes near you without gloves, regardless of who and what you are. It's just
Well,
like
we
you said.
never wore gloves to draw blood, never wore gloves to clean up patients, always bathed people, did mouth care without gloves. We were taught in school that it was disrespectful to wear gloves.
Yes.
To put your hand, you need to put your hand on a patient's skin in order to have some sort of relationship with them. And so it was really tough for us to get into universal precautions.
Yes.
So
yes.
I just
that
think
was a hard thing to learn.
I just think it's amazing that the two of you, this has been your life's work, and just the simple fact that there was so much fear and misinformation that you were following the science of it, and you were educating your coworkers, just as a matter of course. I mean, I can't. I see. This is stuff I can't.
Yeah, and just-
imagine
We probably
happening.
never think of nurses as being science-based, but they are.
Right,
and
people see the human.
For a while.
Yeah.
People see the humanity, the human side, not the education and not the science aspect of it. And having a few people who are nurses in my life, that kind of set me straight. As with anything, it's like if you don't know a community, you don't really know
Sure.
where they're coming from, and it's good to have diversity in your life.
What about that the doctor that got all bent out of shape that you had written notes in the charts? Was that just like a doctor?
That's really funny because that doctor later on became a fairly close friend. He, you know, the way private practice was back in the 70s and 80s is that, even the 90s really, the patients belonged to the doctor,
Yeah.
and so that was their turf, and they did not want unasked consultants to be rendering any opinions, which I didn't in my notes, but I did write pretty thorough notes, and they were really obvious because our group, our clinician group, had decided to develop a note that was blue. So anytime you saw the blue note, you knew a nurse specialist had seen the patient, and so I got in an elevator once, and he said, he must have seen my ID, and he said, "What the hell are you doing writing in my patient's charts?" And I just didn't get into it with him. But later on, he became ill and became forgetful and was unable to run his practice. And so he would call either Ellen or me, "What should I do now? What should I do now?" Until he was able to sell his practice. We basically helped him run his practice. So we became very close friends. So.
Probably all because you kept your mouth closed
In the elevator, which
Yes.
is so unlike me, let me tell you.
Because I loved what was written after that was, it wasn't going to be something nice.
It would not have been nice.
I identified very strongly with that moment in the book. I was like, good on you.
There are very few times when I've held my tongue. That was one of them. I don't know how it happened.
Yes, Valerie was not one to ever hold her tongue back in those days. Yes,
I got into lots
I
of
was
trouble.
I was the quieter one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Early
if you're
on.
quieter, sometimes you can be a little more subversive, Yeah, knowing
Yes, I
that.
did have a.
I don't know. She's not quiet now.
I always have my poker face on.
Oh, wait, I do have a question. Did you really smash all of the dishware with a hammer?
I did.
I love that.
I did. I smashed all of it and everything in the refrigerator too.
Okay, wait, guys. So
Back up.
There's a section in the book. Valerie's married to this dick, and
Sorry, Joe, if you're watching this.
Joe, listen. To be honest, you didn't come off well, but so she comes home from work. Exhausted. Like, you're going to nursing school, you're working your ass off at the same time. It was just, I identified with that. Like, you're scrappy New Yorker trying to make it, right? So she comes home, blah, blah, blah. Some guy is pissing on their window, and she's like, "Really?" And the guy's like, "Ugh." The husband's like, "So, what's for dinner?" Valerie goes nuts, and then, she's having her like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this." And then hubby asks again, "So, are you gonna make dinner or what?" So she goes to the kitchen with a fucking hammer, and she starts smashing all the dishes, the crockery, the glassware, and she's like, "No, the dishes are done!" I laughed out loud reading that, because I just pictured this, because again, I had this mental image of the two of you, and I just pictured and now I can see it, like this dynamo just whipping around the house, and this unsupportive person just "Well, what about me?"
That's sort of what it was like. It was. It was not funny at all at the time. I was
Sure
really
it wasn't.
upset, especially when I came back 3 days later and everything was the way I left it, and I had to clean it up
That's what
anyway.
it was. That's what set her off, was that she came home and everything was still
Oh well. I didn't really expect anybody to come in magically clean it up.
but the level of frustration, take a hammer.
I'm glad we got that across.
It was just it was one of the lighter parts, because honestly, reading this book, I was like,
Yes,
oh my God.
we did have to throw in some, where our lives were always intersecting.
Yes.
We've known each other, 42 years now, just
Yeah.
about?
Yeah.
And our lives for 42 years now have intersected, along many, many paths. Good and, horrible times and good times. And so, Valerie's godmother to both my children, and was my maid of honor at my first wedding. And, we've just, she took care of my son when my first husband was off somewhere, and she moved in with me. I
2
mean, we
months
just,
of carrying him like this.
carrying him around, and so I could go to work. I mean, really, we've
That's
just
a friend.
Yeah.
we've been, really through quite a lot
But that's
together.
an important through line of in the book as well.
Yes.
Just as you're going along your own life's paths, you just keep coming
Yep.
back to one
Yep.
another, and that's something divine working there, because it helped get all this out, and helped you help each other, help other people.
Yes, yes. This book brought us back together. In fact, because we hadn't spoken in, I don't know, 1 or 2 years when I started to write the book first. And then
What was the catalyst that got this into your head to get this on paper?
the catalyst was a friend of mine that I knew from when I was 10 years old. There were a group of us. And I had a reunion 3 years ago. and they were all there. And we went around the room and said, what have you been up to the last 50 years? Because we're all in our 60s.
In 2
and when I said what I did, he said, you should write a book. And I said, nah, I don't know how to write a book. He says, no, really, you should write a book. And and we talked about it for a minute, and then I just tossed it off. And then for several months, I sat on it. And then one day I sat down at my computer and I started writing, and all the stuff came out that I remembered, because I remember it so clearly, like yesterday. Some of the stories that you see, that exact dialogue is what I said.
Oh, thank goodness for that.
And I will never forget it, never. And now it's certainly memorialized, but I realized as I wrote, I don't know, 20, 30 pages or something, and then I realized, wait a minute, something's missing. And I realized, Valerie, I called her up, and and I said, hi, Val, and now we haven't spoken in like 2 years, and she says, oh, hi, how are you? And fine, and I said, you're probably wondering why I'm calling, and she says, well, yeah, and I said, we're writing a book, and she said, well, okay, and then, would you like to tell me what it's about? And I said, yep, we're writing about our time together as nurses during the beginning of the AIDS epidemic all the way through what we're doing now. And she started writing, I started writing. We did mostly by email, back and forth, should we put this there, and so on. And then I started the query process. I learned a lot about writing and publishing and publicizing and marketing. I learned a lot of stuff going through the process. And we ended up with an indie publisher who was the only one who thought that this book was worth being out there. But mostly we got very, very kind rejections. Like, you're true warriors, your heroes coming back from battle. Well, we didn't want to hear that. We wanted to hear, we'll publish your book. But it's not commercial enough. It won't sell.
We got,
Are you kidding?
It won't
really
sell. 50, 100, 150 rejections.
So many.
Many rejections.
One said,
They're dumb.
you wrote a book version of the AIDS memorial quilt. That's what one agent said. While very
Which is
interesting,
really not true.
and again, everybody thanked us for being nurses, but I won't represent you, because it's not going to be a commercial success.
No, I disagree. I disagree with that, because this book, you can't put it down once you start it. You really can't. And I was like pissed off today in between when I had to like put my phone in my pocket, because I was like, I wanted to finish that chapter, And,
I went through it like water.
Yeah, and the personal stories that you had, like these patients, when you finally there was a handle on what was going on. You guys are still kind of helpless, but the relationships that you have with these mostly men, it's amazing. When half of them, or a lot of them, their families disowned them. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with them, and they had you. Like the one gentleman who passed away, no family. You made calls. If it wasn't for you, where would his body be? You made phone calls.
In Pottersfield.
Yeah, to find a funeral home, and you finally found Redden's on 14th Street. And then I had asked a question about that. I didn't realize that funeral home took everyone during that time.
They did.
I know that funeral home, and so it's the little things like that. Those stories need to be told.
Yes. I had a patient live with me.
I know.
Yeah, well, how did that come to be?
It's so hard to tell. Probably because he sounded like one of the Beatles. But
I like the part where, if someone was going to ask you that now, you'd be like, "Fuck no."
Yeah, exactly.
What was I thinking?
Exactly. Today I was be like, "What? Are you out of your mind?" I don't know. This kid. He was just a kid. He was 21 years old, and he had nowhere to go. He just had nowhere to go. He was going to live in the hospital because there was no services for him because he wasn't a citizen. He didn't want to go back to England because his parents didn't want him, and I had talked to my former husband, and I said, we have to let him live with us. And at first he said no, and then I said, just go talk to him. Just go talk to him. You'll see what I'm talking about. And he did, and we did. And that was his discharge plan. We just took him home. It was like, and we we weren't all that much older than him, you know, like 7, 8
And
years.
didn't live in a big apartment.
No,
either.
well,
It wasn't like
one-bedroom
they were in a
apartment.
house or anything.
One bedroom apartment. He slept on a couch, and we gave him money, just like an allowance. And
Yeah, because he cleaned the house for you guys.
he did.
Live in hell. Help.
That was quite. Yes, it was. But
Gosh.
I don't know, you know, but I think back on that and I think, wow, you know, I took a patient home to live, you know, like, I'm like, yeah, I really did that. But, you know, he lived only till 26 years old. But you know what? He had a good
Run during that
he
time.
had a good run, yeah. From 21, when the time he came to us, and then he met the love of his life, and then he moved to Jersey, and you know, and he had the love of his life, and that was like, that's what I can remember for that.
That was something of a
No.
gift for him.
Yes, and
Yeah.
it was a gift for me, you know, to have had him in my life.
Mhm.
It really was. It just, God, you know, and I think, how old would he be now? 53, 55, something like that. I just like, you know, when you think about it and you go, oh,
Yeah, I can't think
like
about
just
it.
like these lives were like unfinished.
Mm-hmm.
They were just unfinished. Like what would have happened for them, you know? Like how great would they have become? What potential?
It's almost an entire generation of gay men lost.
Yes.
And there are the survivors out there who tell the tale just like you're telling the tales of those who are no longer able to say what they went through, and to tell of the love that they had, the love that they didn't have, the love that you were able to put into their care, which is, again, that was your gift to them in giving them comfort toward the end, and as things got a little bit better, helping to extend their lives.
Just so much incredible bravery in that time, because I mean, how old was I? I was like youngish kid, and just, the news made it seem like everyone's gonna have AIDS in 5 years, and all this stuff, and all the precautions that people were taking, but yet you guys were bathing these guys, washing their hair for them, like treating them like human beings, where I can't remember which one of you, I can't remember the guy Leonard, you washed his hair.
That's Ellen.
Yes, that was me. And then ICU
At the
in
wonderful
Queens. Yeah.
ICU hospital in Queens.
So
God, that
yes,
place was-
yeah, that was a.
And then that nurse, was it the secretary?
It was my charge nurse, my assistant
What are you
head nurse, who
doing?
said, what do you mean? What are you doing in there so long? You don't have to wash his hair. What about your children? That's what she said. I didn't have
about your
children. I didn't have children at the time. You're going to give this to everybody. Like,
And by then we actually did know it was
we actually did
bloodborne.
know.
We did know how it was transmitted, so there was
Yes.
no possibility that I was going to
I
be
mean-
giving it to her unborn children.
But that's also something that you face. You faced, as more knowledge came about, you faced willful ignorance.
yes.
Well, I think what we faced also was fear. People get fearful and they stop thinking. And so, in many ways, you have to forgive them. You have to keep hammering at them. And people don't always learn when you tell them factual tidbits. Sometimes you have to paint a picture that allows their empathy to be awakened. And so that was a lot of what we did. We tried to humanize the patients. So and it's hard because when people are so prejudiced, either they're prejudiced because the patient is gay or because they're of color or they're not from the United States for whatever reason, or maybe they're an injection drug user and people want to blame them for their whole everything, then what you have to do is humanize them for people who are being cruel. So that's one of the reasons why we learned that technique, and I think it really did help people to see their patients as humans.
Yeah. When we went to Lenox Hill, we were very, very fortunate because I was hired before the unit even opened, so I got to set it up. I got to hire everybody. that I wanted nurses, which is why I hired all new graduate nurses. And I said, I'm going to train them from scratch so they have no bad habits. And we had a very endearing policy of caring and love and empathy and passion about caring for these patients. And if anybody didn't show that or change their mind or got fearful, they could leave. The same thing with our volunteers, and our doctors were volunteers, and then you know, I thought of Valerie when we needed the clinician spot. Valerie came on board, so, and she was instrumental in helping me train some of these nurses that were brand new out of school, let alone dealing with a new disease and all this new medicines. Well, now these nurses are all nurses 30 plus years, so they're. You know, they've gone on to other things, teaching and nurse practitioners and a lot of great things because they started with us. But we could foster the kind of environment that we wanted our patients to have, and that was like the best job I could ever ask for, was to be able to do that you know, create that environment on 8 East where everybody said, please, can I be on 8 East? Can I come to 8 East? I don't want to come to the hospital unless I come to 8 East. And we had to overcome a lot of obstacles because some doctors would say, well, they don't need to be on 8 East, they could be wherever, you know. And then as the years went by, is there a bed on 8 East? Is there a bed on 8 East? I'm not admitting unless there's a bed there, because they knew the environment or the care that the patient would receive.
Right.
Yeah, when you talk about bravery, I think about how brave it was for a patient to even come to the hospital before 8 East or before a unit like that, because they knew how horrible it was going to be. And that's really brave.
Yeah, because they were, you know, a lot of
But
people were
after
outed
80s
at the same time.
Yeah,
They were just outed.
found out they were sick, their families found out they were gay, they found out their families didn't want them to be gay enough that they would get abandoned, and
Yes.
they would lose their jobs, their insurance, their
So, yeah.
apartments.
Their entire world
Their entire
was turned upside
world,
down.
Yes.
So
The
that
bottom
was,
drops down,
you know, those people were brave.
Yeah, they were braver than we were, honestly.
Yeah, we went to work every day, but this was their life.
Somebody who particularly struck an emotional chord with you, whose story that you can share?
Oh, there were so many, but there are two people that I think of when I think of who struck a chord with me, and the first was a woman that I'll call Edie, and she's not in the book, but she was a woman who had not made bad decisions. She had been raised in penury and in a horrible situation and with drugs in the neighborhood, and you know, no chance of getting away from that. And so she became addicted to heroin and was an injection drug user for years, and thereby acquired HIV, and then decided to get clean. And she had already had a son whom her mother was taking care of, and but she got clean and went back to school and got her GED and was going to college, and then found out she had HIV, and in fact had advanced AIDS by then. And she unfortunately had an illness that's called CMV, or cytomegalovirus, and it affected her eyes, and so she started to go blind. And we would give an IV infusion to try to fight it, but when that didn't work, the next step was to do injections directly into the eye. And that has always been my big thing. I cannot stand anything with eyes, I just can't. But she said, I'm going to do this. I have to do this. I can't go blind. I have to take care of my kid. I have to go to school. I have to do what I have to do. So she would go down there and she said, and you're going to stay there with me. And I said, oh, God, don't make me do that. But I would go with her, and I would close my eyes when she was getting the injection. But it's not a pleasant experience. A needle has to go in to take a little fluid out, then another needle goes in and injects the liquid, and then they have to like press on your eye and rub it a little. And it's really, really hard and painful. And she went through it every week for weeks. In one eye, then went blind and went through it again in the other eye. Now, it's not like I don't know many, many people who went through that, but I never saw anybody take it with such fortitude. She was so impressive to me. So she was one person. When she died, I was just so devastated. And And then I had a friend named Joe, and a different Joe. And when his partner died, Mary and I were there, and he actually his partner had a really good death, what I would call a good death, because Joe sort of absconded with him from the hospital and took him home, and we were playing Wagner when he died, and everybody was there. So it was really, in many ways, a beautiful way to go. But the way he died was alone, and everybody was gone by then. All his friends were dead. He had no lover. Everybody was gone. And, that's just a horrible thing. So those people always stay with me. And possibly the third one was a nurse we worked with named Jim. He worked with Ellen first and then worked with me in a research group. And he was so funny and, and so demented at the end. It was really hard. It was really hard to see him go.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to some of my friends who are just, between 5 and 10 years older than me, and they tell me about the time where they were going to a funeral, at least once a week.
Yes, we went, even just for people we hardly even knew, we were going once a week. Forget about even friends. It was a terrible time. Our patients were dying all the time.
I mean, you illustrated that. Just the stories, but also that was something else that stuck out in my mind was when you, because the way the book is organized, they go back to the 70s or 80s or a particular time, and then there will be 2019. So you were reminiscing about all these people, and it was kind of like a chronology. Well, this one died, and then his lover died, and then and I was just like, wow, like, did anybody survive? It was just
some people did survive, actually. So some of the people that I had in clinic did survive, and I still see them in the clinic where I work now. So yes, people did survive. But sometimes when I see them, when I first saw them in the clinic where I work now, I was so surprised because I couldn't have imagined that they would survive, but they did. Because something happened in 1995, the advent of combination therapy, and then in 1996 multiple things were released, and then from then on the cascade of drugs kept coming, and so we really did very, very well. And when I left to do research in 1999, I thought, gosh, what are we going to do? Are we even going to fine tune this? And oh my God, little did I know how much better it was going to get.
The first person that I knew who was positive and passed, had she been able to hold on for one more year, she'd probably still be here. But she, knowing what it was at the time, and she had just mentally given up. So, she didn't have the mental fortitude to keep pushing herself forward. And she just gave up, and she crawled into bed, and then 6 months later she was gone, just because, in my opinion, my non-medical opinion, because she gave up. Had she been able to fight through for another year, she'd still be here.
Yeah, I'm not sure I know what kinds of things people could do, but having good support and people who love you and will take care of you, that's what you need in order to overcome something like that, because there was no medicine. Certainly not until November of 1995.
Right.
Did you ever think that the medical community would have come so far with all these ways to treat it? I mean,
well, I've been part of that for the last 20 years. That's what I've been doing for 20 years.
Does your head spin ever when you think about that?
One of the things that was great about going to Cornell was that, I knew great people at Lenox Hill. I mean, the guys we worked with, the physicians we worked with and at Lenox Hill were great. But the ones at Cornell not only were great, nice humans, but they are brilliant. So it was really wonderful to be able to step into the community of people who were not only, many of them gay themselves, and many of them really interested for not only just academically interested, but personally interested. And to see how that they have responded has, and the ideas they've come up with have been, it's been really great.
I just think it's amazing. There was one little thing that was written in here that I don't think about it. You talked about everything that goes into a little pill that you take.
That's right.
And I sat there, I'm like, God, that's absolutely correct. I don't think about it,
You don't.
but you're one of those people behind,
Right.
and you're one of those people behind, that just blows my mind. I think that's so impressive because I'm not a science nursey person, for starters.
Oh, maybe
but-
you're a little nursey.
Maybe, but nursey, I like it. But that's really impressive that this has become your life's work and you're still actively helping people all this time later. I mean, so what are you doing now?
Well, I teach nursing now at a school in Hicksville. So I'm training brand new nurses.
Do you lock them in a room when they're not?
Yeah, right. I knew that would come up.
They call her a badass. Incidentally.
Yes,
Her students
yes.
call her a badass.
Yeah.
You are.
They actually made a bracelet, a Rainbow Pride bracelet that says WWMD. What would Matzer do? I didn't know anything about it until somebody showed it to me, and it's going through the school. What would Matzer do? And
That's awesome.
But I'm teaching them. We're not even on the section of HIV, but I'm in the clinical with them, and we're at a long-term care facility on event unit. But what I'm able to do is teach them compassion and empathy. That's my goal, is that they can be trained to do things and
Yeah,
procedures.
anybody could be a technocrat, but
yes.
learning how to teach
Yes.
compassion and empathy is the most important thing. The most important.
So that's
So she's
what I've
setting
been
the
doing.
stage for the future.
Yes, because I'm not going to be here forever. I got to
Future badass.
I need some future badasses to take care of these badasses when it's time.
It's not going to happen for a long time for you guys.
And what I'm doing is HIV research still. So I work at the Cornell Medicine College, and I work in the unit that is focused entirely on HIV therapeutics and prevention and cure. I've worked on PrEP studies, and our group was one of those little parts at developing all the one pill once a day regimens that are available now. We did the studies that proved that they were effective and safe and tolerable, and we're working on monoclonal stuff now, and we're inching our way to the cure.
Do you think it's almost within sight?
I think it's within sight. I don't think it'll be before I completely retire. I'm partially retired now, but my goal was to work until I wanted to go there because I thought this would be the group that would find the cure.
Just tell them to work harder.
Yeah.
Faster.
I really misunderstood what research was also. I didn't understand that not everybody is looking through the microscope and sitting at the bench and developing drugs. That clinical research is where it really happens, where you really find out if something is tolerable for humans to take. Is you got to give it to humans. And first you got to find a human to give it to who'd be willing to go through all the trials and tribulations of being in a clinical trial. So I had a lot to learn. I learned the first 5 years were real tough, but it's been a great run for me as well. I've learned so much.
I also love the fact that you're both women, and you're powerful, and you're intelligent, and you're respected, and that's also really cool. Because you're badasses. Because I'm a lady. I'm a lady too. And you guys are. I like it.
Thank you.
You should get a gold hammer. And
I get a gold hammer.
just a little one so you can't do any damage.
Happily, I have a dishwasher now, so I don't have to ever worry about that again.
I love that part.
The book is available at your finer online retailers.
It's Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Amazon. It's not
Best
a-
place to get it.
Yeah, and if you still see a brick and mortar, if they don't have it in stock, you can ask for it and they can order it.
And you know what else? If anybody out there is like a film producer or something like that, somebody needs to make a movie with these women. For real.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Yeah. So we have about 3 or 4 minutes left. Is there any forgotten story that you really want us to make sure to get out there? Any big take-homes that you want people to realize?
I think for me, we need to realize that it's not over. It's not over. Because if we don't put money into research and development, and we start having this stigma and homophobia and discrimination is creeping back in, we're going to have the same thing happen all over again. This was our Holocaust. You know, we just celebrated Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is now 75 years old. Well, the AIDS epidemic is 40 years old, and you know, and it will be 75 years old. And if we don't get past this, we don't get past this, and we don't elect people who will, you know, focus on health care and respect and those things which we hold near and dear, we could see a resurgence of this or something else. And you know, that's what I really hope. I hope I see a cure for this in my lifetime. And I hope that we can live in a world where people are not feared or afraid to be who they are and speak truth to power. And that's what I hope.
I also think that we need to remember that in any civilized society, we have to take care of our people, all of our people. We have to stop looking at people as different and other and realize that we could easily be in that bed. So you need to get your act together and address your prejudices and address your worry about, you know, catching gayness or whatever it is you're worried about. And you need to take care of your people. And we really need to do that.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people don't even think the fact that everybody is just potentially just a couple of bad decisions away from the gutter, if you really look at it. Or I mean, it's
a lot of that is societal as well. Society foists that on them. So that's what I mean about taking care of people, educating them, allowing them to have jobs, allowing them decent housing, all of that.
And then also, we need to write and get behind our elected officials and elect people who are going to put the thought into motion and get the funding to where it needs to be, and to make sure that the money's available and the resources are available to actually move forward and get this thing cured and keep the prevention efforts up and get PrEP out there and prevent other prevention methods, keep them in the mainstream.
Okay.
But I'm really grateful that you both took the time to come and stay with us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us.
And the book again, Nurses on the Inside, available at your finer retailers. Check it out. It is a really good read.
It's really good, guys.
Yeah. Thank you again.
Thank you.
I'm John Griffith.
I'm still Cara Hilda.
And we will see you next time.